The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I remember staring at the subject line for a full 30 seconds before opening it. Organizational restructuring effective immediately. I'm Caroline Webb, and I'd spent the last 11 years building the analytics and strategic forecasting division at Luxel Solutions from the ground up. What started as a 3-person team crammed into a converted storage room had grown into a 32-person powerhouse that generated 43% of the company's predictive models and revenue projections. Every major decision the executive team made ran through my department first. My coffee had gone cold in my hand as I clicked the email open. The message was brief, clinical, and devastating. Daniel Mercer, our CEO, had decided to realign reporting structures to foster fresh leadership perspectives. Translation: my entire division was being handed to someone else. That someone else was Connor Mercer, Daniel's 28-year-old nephew who joined the company 6 months ago with an MBA from a mediocre program and exactly zero experience in data analytics. I read it 3 times, each pass making my chest tighter. 12 years. 4 industry awards. 2 patents in predictive modeling algorithms. A team I'd personally recruited, trained, and mentored. And it was being given to a kid who still called spreadsheets Excel documents, and thought Python was just a snake. The email stated I'd be transitioning to a senior advisory role, where I could share my expertise across multiple departments. It was corporate speak for being shelved. I'd report to Connor now, offering guidance while he took credit for everything my team produced. My hands were shaking when I set my phone down. The thing about being good at your job, truly exceptional at it, is that you see patterns others miss. You notice the small details that add up to big pictures. And as I sat there in my office, the morning sun cutting harsh angles through the blinds, I started seeing the pattern that had led to this moment. Connor had been hired as a special projects coordinator back in January. His first week, he'd sat in on one of our division meetings, taking notes on his laptop while asking questions that revealed he didn't understand the fundamental difference between correlation and causation. I'd spent an hour after that meeting patiently explaining basic statistical concepts. By February, he was attending our weekly strategy sessions, always positioning himself next to Daniel during presentations. He'd nod along enthusiastically, occasionally interjecting with observations that were either obvious or wrong. My team had started exchanging glances when he spoke. In March, Connor began scheduling one-on-ones with my senior analysts. He called them knowledge-sharing sessions. My lead programmer, James Thornton, told me Connor had spent 40 minutes asking him to explain how our core algorithms worked, then asked if James would be willing to document everything in a simplified format for training purposes. I should have seen it then. I should have recognized the land grab happening in slow motion. April brought Connor to the executive floor. His office was suddenly 3 doors down from Daniel's, and he started appearing in meetings I wasn't invited to. When I asked Daniel about it during our monthly check-in, he'd smiled that politician's smile and said, "Just getting Connor acclimated to how things work at the leadership level. You understand, family, mentorship, all that." I'd understood all right. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. By May, Connor was being introduced to clients as Co-Director of Analytics Strategy. Co-Director. A title that didn't exist until he needed one. He'd fumbled through a presentation to one of our biggest clients, North Star Financial, getting basic terminology wrong until I'd stepped in to salvage the meeting. Afterward, the client had pulled me aside and asked pointedly if everything was okay with our team structure. "Just some growing pains," I'd said, maintaining my professional smile while internally screaming. June had been the worst. Connor started making suggestions about streamlining processes and updating our approach for modern markets. His ideas were either impractical, impossible, or directly contradicted by data. But Daniel loved them. Every half-baked notion was met with enthusiastic approval, while my carefully researched recommendations suddenly required further analysis before implementation. And now July. The inevitable conclusion to 6 months of systematic undermining. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window. My office overlooked downtown Seattle, the morning commute flowing through the streets below like blood through arteries. Somewhere down there, thousands of people were heading to jobs where their competence mattered, where years of experience counted for something. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Did you see the email? Please tell me this is a joke." Then another from Alicia Martinez. my senior data scientist. Caroline, we need to talk. This is insane. Within minutes, my entire team was messaging me. Shock, anger, confusion, and above all, loyalty. They knew what I'd built. They knew what Connor was. I typed a response to the group chat we'd created years ago for after-hours coordination. Meeting in conference room C at 9:30. Say nothing to anyone until then. At 9:15 I walked past Daniel's office. His door was open and I could see him on the phone laughing at something. Connor sat across from him, feet up on the chair beside him, grinning like he'd won the lottery. I suppose he had. Neither of them noticed me. I was already becoming invisible. Conference room C was our team's unofficial territory, tucked away on the fourth floor where the executive team rarely ventured. When I walked in at 9:28, all 32 members of my division were already there. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Okay, I said, closing the door behind me. I know you've all seen the announcement. I know you're angry. So am I. This is complete garbage, James said. He was normally the calm one, the steady presence who kept everyone grounded during deadline crunches. Seeing him this agitated told me everything about how the team felt. Connor doesn't know the first thing about what we do. He's going to run this division into the ground. Probably, I agreed. But right now we need to talk about what happens next. Alicia leaned forward. Are you leaving? Because if you're leaving, I'm leaving. I didn't come to Luxel to work for some nepotism hire who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I haven't decided yet, I said carefully. But here's what I need from all of you. Professionalism. Whatever you think of this decision, whatever you think of Connor, we are going to continue doing our jobs to the same standard we always have. Why? This from Derek Flynn, our youngest analyst but one of the sharpest minds on the team. Why should we bust our asses for someone who's just going to take credit for our work? Because, I said slowly, our work speaks for itself. And because the best revenge is to be so good at what you do that the truth becomes impossible to hide. I didn't tell them what I was really thinking. I didn't tell them that I'd already started running calculations in my head, analyzing the situation like any other problem that needed solving. I didn't tell them that years of predicting market trends and human behavior had taught me exactly how this scenario would play out. Connor would make mistakes. Big ones. It was inevitable. He lacked the knowledge, the experience, and most critically, the temperament to lead a high-performing technical team. He'd alienate people, make bad calls, and eventually spectacularly fail. My job was to make sure I was positioned to catch everything when it fell. What do you need from us? James asked quietly. Document everything, I said. Every project, every algorithm, every piece of analysis you do. Time stamps, version controls, author attributions. Be meticulous. And keep your personal copies of all your work. Understanding dawned on several faces. And one more thing, I added. When Connor starts making changes, and he will, let him. Don't fight it. Don't argue. Document his directives. Implement them exactly as he specifies and document the results. Even if we know his ideas are terrible? Alicia asked. Especially if you know his ideas are terrible. The meeting ended at 10:15. I'd spent 45 minutes answering questions, calming fears, and projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. But I meant what I'd said. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. At 11 o'clock, I received a calendar invitation from Connor for a 2 p.m. meeting. The subject line read, Transition Discussion and Team Direction. I spent my lunch hour doing something I should have done months ago. I made copies of everything. Every project file, every proprietary algorithm I'd developed, every piece of documentation. I backed it all up to 3 separate secure locations. Then I reviewed my employment contract, specifically the intellectual property clauses and the sections on wrongful termination. At 1:55 I walked to Connor's new office, my old conference room hastily converted with furniture that still had tags on it. Connor was sitting behind a glass desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, wearing a suit that fit him the way a child wears their parents' clothes. He looked up when I entered and gave me what I'm sure he thought was a magnanimous smile. Caroline, come and sit down. Can I get you anything? Water. I'm fine, I said, taking the chair across from him. Great. He leaned back, fingers steepled like he'd seen executives do in movies. So, I wanted to have this conversation face to face because I really respect what you've built here. The division is in an incredible place and I'm excited to take it to the next level. I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. Daniel and I have been talking about fresh directions for the analytics team. New methodologies, innovative approaches, really pushing the envelope. And we both agreed that having you in an advisory capacity gives us the best of both worlds. Your experience available when we need it, but also room for new perspectives to flourish. New perspectives, I repeated neutrally. Exactly. Look, I know this transition might feel sudden, but I promise you this is going to be great for everyone. You'll have less day-to-day stress, more time for strategic thinking, and I'll make sure you get credit for all the foundational work you've done. He said this with such earnest sincerity that I almost laughed. Almost. What exactly will my role entail? I asked. Well, you'll be available for consultation on major projects, help onboard new initiatives, provide historical context when needed. Think of yourself as a resource. A resource. 11 years and I'd been reduced to a resource. And the team reports to you now? Officially, yes. But Caroline, I want you to know that I value your input. Anytime you have concerns or suggestions, my door is always open. Good to know, I said. What's your vision for the division? His eyes lit up. This was what he'd been waiting for, a chance to impress me with his grand plans. I'm glad you asked. First, I think we've been too focused on traditional modeling approaches. I want to bring in machine learning, AI integration, really leverage cutting-edge technology. We already use machine learning, I said. Have been for 3 years. Our predictive accuracy rate is 94%. Right, but I'm talking about next-level AI. The really advanced stuff. What specifically? Well, neural networks, deep learning algorithms, that kind of thing. We use those too. James heads up our neural network team. Connor's smile faltered slightly. Okay, but I'm sure we can optimize them. Make them more efficient. How? That's what we'll figure out together. This is about innovation, Caroline. Thinking outside the box. I nodded slowly. What else? I want to restructure the team. Right now it's too siloed. I'm thinking we break down those barriers, create more collaborative workflows. The team collaborates constantly, I said. We have daily stand-ups, weekly integration meetings and cross-functional project groups. But it could be better. More dynamic. In what way? He was getting frustrated now. I could see it in the tightening around his eyes, the slight flush creeping up his neck. Look, Caroline, I appreciate your thoroughness. But sometimes you need to trust the process. Change can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth. I understand, I said. When do you want to announce these changes to the team? Already scheduled a division-wide meeting for Thursday. I'll lay out the new vision, get everyone excited about where we're heading. And you'd like me there? Of course. Your presence will help with the transition. Show everyone that you support the new direction. I stood up. I'll be there. Is there anything else? Just. He stood as well, coming around the desk. I know this isn't easy. Change never is. But I really do hope we can work together effectively. Daniel speaks so highly of you. Does he? I said flatly. Absolutely. He said you've been the backbone of this division. Those are big shoes to fill. Yes, I agreed. They are. I left his office feeling oddly calm. The anger from this morning had crystallized into something clearer, sharper. I knew exactly what was going to happen now. Connor would announce his changes, implement his innovations, and my team would watch the carefully constructed systems we'd built start to crack under the weight of his incompetence. And I would document every single moment. Thursday's meeting was a masterclass in corporate delusion. Connor stood at the front of the room, PowerPoint presentation glowing behind him, and spoke for 45 minutes about synergy, disruption, and paradigm shifts. He used the word revolutionary 7 times. He promised that under his leadership, the division would achieve unprecedented success. My team sat in polite silence, faces carefully neutral. They'd learned from me, show nothing, record everything. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, Connor, these changes sound great, but how do we implement them? He was talking to himself, having asked a question no one actually posed. That's the exciting part. Starting next week, we're going to restructure our project allocation system. James raised his hand. Could you elaborate on that? Sure. Right now, projects are assigned based on specialty and expertise. I think that's limiting. I want to rotate people through different types of projects, cross-train everyone, build versatility. Alicia spoke up. So you want the neural network specialists working on basic forecasting, and the forecasting team building neural networks? Exactly. See, you get it. That will significantly slow down project completion times, she said carefully. Each specialization requires years of specific knowledge. But imagine the innovation when people bring fresh eyes to problems. Connor countered. That's how breakthroughs happen. That's how mistakes happen, someone muttered. I didn't see who. Connor either didn't hear or pretended not to. I'm also implementing a new approval process. All project plans will come through me before execution. I want to make sure we're aligned with the bigger vision. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Previously, my senior team leaders had autonomy to greenlight projects within their domains. It was efficient, it respected their expertise, and it kept things moving fast. Now Connor was creating a bottleneck himself. How long do you anticipate the approval process taking? I asked from the back of the room. Shouldn't be more than a couple days. I'll review the proposals, provide feedback, and we'll iterate until it's perfect. A couple of days. We had 17 active projects and typically initiated 5 to 7 new projects per week. Connor had just committed to reviewing and approving at least 25 complex technical proposals weekly, in addition to his other duties. It was mathematically impossible, especially for someone who didn't understand the work itself. But I didn't say that. I simply nodded. The meeting ended with forced applause and confused faces. As people filed out, several team members caught my eye. I gave them small, reassuring nods. Trust the process. The first week under Connor's leadership was chaos barely contained. The new approval process immediately created a backlog. Projects that should have taken hours to kick off sat in Connor's queue for days. When he did provide feedback, it was often contradictory or based on fundamental misunderstandings of what the projects were meant to accomplish. James came to my desk on Wednesday, 3 days after a critical update to our flagship forecasting model should have been deployed. He still hasn't approved the neural network optimization, James said quietly. I've sent 3 follow-up emails. The client presentation is Friday. Did you document each delay? Time-stamped every communication. Good. Send one more email clearly stating the deadline and the consequences of missing it. CC me. James did exactly that. Connor approved the project Thursday afternoon with a cheerful email saying he'd been swamped but loved the initiative. The team worked until 2 a.m. to complete work that should have taken 3 days, delivering it barely in time for the client presentation. The presentation itself went fine. The model worked perfectly because my team knew what they were doing. Connor took credit for pushing the team to deliver excellence under tight deadlines. The client, a woman named Elizabeth Cartwright from Xerox Industries, pulled me aside afterward. Caroline, I noticed your name wasn't on the project lead documentation anymore. Organizational restructuring, I said with a professional smile. I see. Her expression said she saw quite a bit more than that. Well, I hope you know that we've worked with Luxel for 5 years specifically because of your team's capabilities. I trust you'll let me know if anything changes that might affect our partnership. Of course, I said, tucking her business card into my pocket. Week 2 brought Connor's innovation initiative. He'd read an article about agile methodology, or more accurately, he'd skimmed an article about agile methodology, and decided our entire workflow needed to be restructured around it. Never mind that we already used adapted agile principles where appropriate. Never mind that forcing agile onto pure research projects made no sense. Connor had a vision and by God he was implementing it. Daily stand-up meetings were mandated. Not just for individual teams but for the entire division. 32 people, every morning at 8:30 a.m., going around in a circle describing what they'd done yesterday, what they'd do today, and what blockers they faced. The meetings regularly ran 90 minutes. Productivity plummeted. People who'd been efficiently working on deep technical problems were now spending a tenth of their day in performative meetings where Connor could demonstrate his leadership. Derek came to me after the 4th such meeting looking exhausted. Caroline, this is insane. I've gotten more done in any single morning before these meetings than I've gotten done in 3 days combined now. I know, I said. Can't you talk to him? Or to Daniel. Would you like me to document your concerns and present them? Yes. Please. I drafted a carefully worded memo outlining the productivity impacts of the new meeting structure, complete with data showing the decline in project completion rates. I sent it to Connor with a CC to Daniel. Connor's response came within an hour. Thanks for the feedback. I think these adjustment periods are normal. Let's give it a few more weeks to see how things settle. Sometimes productivity dips before it soars. Daniel didn't respond at all. Week 3 introduced the Collaborative Workspace Initiative. Connor had decided that assigned desks were too hierarchical and isolated. Everyone would hot desk, moving to different locations each day to foster spontaneous collaboration. This meant that the neural network team, who needed 3 monitors and specialized hardware, had to pack up their equipment each evening. The data science team, who worked with sensitive client information, had no secure workspace. And the coordination team, who scheduled between 4 time zones, never knew where anyone would be sitting on a given day. I watched it unfold with the detached fascination of an anthropologist observing a particularly self-destructive tribe. The complaints piled up. I documented them all. By week 4, the cracks were becoming visible even to people outside the division. Project deliveries were behind schedule. Quality was slipping. Not because the team was less capable, but because they were hamstrung by processes that actively prevented good work. Client feedback, previously glowing, was becoming concerned. And through it all, Connor remained cheerfully oblivious. He'd found his groove as a leader, or at least his impression of what leadership looked like. He gave motivational speeches about excellence. He sent company-wide emails celebrating wins that were actually just normal project completions. He scheduled more meetings to address the problems created by previous meetings. It was almost impressive in a horrifying way. I kept my head down, showed up to meetings when requested, provided advice when asked, knowing it wouldn't be followed, and maintained detailed records of every decision, every delay, every consequence. My team was frustrated, exhausted, and increasingly angry. But they trusted me. They knew I was building towards something even if they couldn't see what yet. Late one evening in August, about 6 weeks into Connor's tenure, I was working alone in the office. Most people had left hours ago, but I was reviewing the quarter's performance metrics. The numbers were damning. Project completion rate, down 37%. Client satisfaction scores, down 18 points. Team overtime hours, up 143%. Internal error rate, up 22%. Revenue from new contracts, down 41%. And projected Q4 performance, if current trends continued, catastrophic. I was creating a visualization of this data when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I looked up to see Daniel Mercer standing in my doorway. "Caroline, burning the midnight oil. Just catching up on some analysis," I said neutrally. He walked in without invitation, hands in his pockets, that same politician's smile on his face. "I wanted to check in with you. See how the transition's been going. It's been an adjustment for everyone. Connor mentioned you've been very supportive. I appreciate that." I said nothing. Daniel sat on the edge of my desk and I had to resist the urge to tell him to get off. "Look, I know this wasn't the outcome you were hoping for. But sometimes organizations need fresh blood, new perspectives. Connor brings energy and innovation that, frankly, had become a bit stagnant." "Stagnant," I repeated. "No offense intended. You've done remarkable work. But there's a difference between maintenance and growth. Connor's going to take the division places it's never been." I notice you've been sending some concerns through official channels. The meeting schedules, the workspace changes. Just documenting impact for leadership review. Right. Well, here's the thing, Caroline. Change is uncomfortable. There's always going to be resistance, especially from people who were comfortable with the old way of doing things. But as a leader, and you've been a leader, you know that sometimes you have to push through that resistance. I met his eyes. Even when the data shows the changes are counterproductive, data can be interpreted many ways. And 6 weeks isn't enough time to judge the success of a major transformation. What would be enough time? End of quarter at least. Give Connor room to establish his vision. And if performance continues declining? Daniel's smile thinned. I have complete confidence in Connor's abilities. And Caroline? I hope you're being careful about what message you're sending to the team. Leadership needs to present a united front. It was a warning. A clear one. Of course, I said. United front. Good. He stood up, brushing invisible lint from his pants. Connor's family. I'm sure you understand what that means to me. I want to see him succeed. I'm sure you do. After he left, I sat in the dark office for a long time, the city lights spreading out below my window. The message had been clear. Fall in line or get out. But Daniel had made a critical error. He'd tipped his hand. He'd shown me that he knew things weren't going well, that he'd received my documentation, and that he was choosing to ignore reality in favor of protecting his nephew. That meant when things inevitably collapsed, and he couldn't claim ignorance. I smiled in the darkness and went back to my analysis. September brought a cascade of failures. The Xerox Industries contract, our second largest account, didn't renew. Elizabeth Cartwright called me directly to explain. It's nothing personal, Caroline, but we can't work with the current structure. If things change, please reach out. North Star Financial reduced their contract scope by 60%, citing delivery concerns and communication issues. 2 smaller clients canceled outright. Connor's response was to schedule a mandatory Saturday team-building retreat to rebuild our collective energy. The retreat consisted of trust falls, a ropes course, and a 4-hour seminar on positive thinking. 3 people quit the following week. One of them was James. He came to my office on a Wednesday afternoon, resignation letter in hand, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. I can't do this anymore, Caroline. I've got offers from 2 other companies. Both of them pay more, and neither of them requires me to explain basic statistics to my boss daily. I understand, I said quietly. Do you? Because I feel like I'm abandoning you. But I can't watch what he's doing to everything we built. James, you don't owe me your misery. If leaving is the right choice for you, then leave. What about you? Why are you staying? I looked at him for a long moment. Because I'm not done yet. He studied my face, then slowly nodded. You have a plan. I have patience. Whatever you're doing, I hope it works. This place doesn't deserve to survive if it's going to be run like this. After he left, I updated my documentation. 3 resignations in 1 week. Total team attrition since Connor took over. 6 people, 18% of the division. Alicia knocked on my door that evening. I need to know if you're staying, she said without preamble. Bez, I got a job offer today. Significantly better pay, better title, better everything. But I won't take it if you tell me there's a reason to stay. This was it. The moment where I either admitted defeat or asked people to suffer through my gambit. How long until you need to decide? I asked. 2 weeks. Give me 1 week. If I don't have a concrete answer for you by then, take the job with my blessing. She searched my face. You have something planned. I have a board meeting scheduled. Her eyebrows rose. The quarterly review? Yes. And you're going to? I'm going to present data. A slow smile spread across her face. Oh, that's beautiful. Only if it works. It'll work. The numbers don't lie. The quarterly board review was scheduled for the last Thursday of September. Typically, department heads presented their division's performance, challenges, and projections. As the former division head, I'd presented at every board meeting for the past 8 years. This time Connor would be presenting. His first time in front of the board. I spent a week preparing 2 presentations. The first was the one Connor had asked me to help him with. A sanitized, positive spin version of Q3 that emphasized transition challenges and investment in new processes, while glossing over the actual performance decline. The second presentation was the truth. Pure, unvarnished data. 3 days before the meeting, Connor sent me his draft slides. They were objectively terrible, cluttered, full of jargon, lacking clear narrative structure. More importantly, they buried the real numbers under layers of explanatory text and deflection. I sent back minor suggestions, nothing that would actually improve the presentation. He thanked me effusively. The morning of the board meeting, I arrived early. The conference room on the executive floor was set up for 10 board members plus Daniel and the presenting department heads. I chose a seat toward the back, laptop ready. Connor arrived 20 minutes before the meeting, looking nervous. He'd worn his most expensive suit and had clearly been practicing his confident leader posture. When he saw me, he came over. "You'll back me up if they ask technical questions, right?" "Of course," I said. "And you think the presentation looks good? It's exactly what you wanted to show them." He nodded, reassured, and went to chat with Daniel. The board members filed in at 9 a.m. sharp. I recognized most of them: venture capital partners, industry veterans, one former government official. The board chair was a woman named Helen Ashworth, 70 years old with steel gray hair and a reputation for suffering no fools. Daniel called the meeting to order, ran through some preliminary business, then introduced Connor. Many of you met Connor earlier this year. He's taken over our analytics and strategic forecasting division from Caroline Webb, who'd led the group for over a decade. Connor's bringing fresh energy and innovative thinking to the role, and I'm excited for you to hear about the division's new direction. Connor stood, clicked to his first slide, and began. He was nervous but not terrible. He hit his talking points about transformation, innovation, and building for the future. He showed charts that highlighted the few successful projects while minimizing the failures. He talked about team building and culture. What he didn't talk about specifically was the actual performance metrics. About 15 minutes in, Helen interrupted. "Connor, these slides are very nice, but I'm not seeing the Q3 numbers. Revenue, project completion, client retention. The actual performance data." Connor fumbled slightly. "Right, yes, those are... Well, as I mentioned, we've been in a transition phase, so... I understand that. Show me the numbers." He clicked to a slide that had revenue displayed. The chart was formatted to make the decline look less severe, with a truncated y-axis and quarterly targets that had been quietly revised downward. "So we're down 11% from Q2, Helen said, reading the chart. "And compared to Q3 last year?" Connor glanced at his notes. "The year-over-year comparison is somewhat complicated because of methodology changes." "How much?" Helen's voice was sharp. 23%, I said quietly from the back. Every head in the room turned toward me. "Revenue is down 23% year-over-year, I continued, standing up. Project completion rate has declined 37%. Client retention is at its lowest point in 5 years. We've lost 3 major contracts and 6 team members." Connor's face went pale. "Caroline, I don't think this is the appropriate forum." "On the contrary," Helen said. "This is exactly the appropriate forum. Caroline, do you have supporting documentation?" "I do. Please share it." I connected my laptop to the presentation system. Connor's slides disappeared, replaced by my analysis. The first slide was simple: a year-over-year comparison of every key metric. Red arrows pointed downward across the board. "Since Connor took leadership of the division in July," I said, my voice steady, "we've experienced the steepest performance decline in the division's history. This isn't a transition period adjustment. This is systematic failure." I clicked to the next slide, a timeline of Connor's major decisions and their measurable impacts. Day 1. Implementation of new approval process. Result: project initiation delays increased by 400%. Week 2. Mandatory daily division-wide stand-ups. Result: productive work hours decreased by 12%. Week 3. Hot desking initiative. Result: specialized team efficiency decreased by 18 to 29% depending on function. Week 5. Agile transformation mandate for research projects. Result: research cycle times increased by 56%. I continued through 12 slides of meticulous documentation. Every decision Connor had made, every impact it had created, every warning that had been ignored. The board members were leaning forward now, studying the data on their own tablets where I'd shared the full report. "The division is on track to lose 48% of its revenue year-over-year by end of Q4 if current trends continue," I said. "We're facing potential loss of 3 additional major clients. Staff attrition is at 18% and climbing. And our competitive advantage in predictive analytics has been effectively eliminated by operational dysfunction." I clicked to my final slide. It showed 2 projection models. One where the current leadership continued, one where course correction happened immediately. Under current leadership, the division will be revenue negative by Q2 next year. With immediate intervention, we can recover to baseline performance by Q3 next year and resume growth trajectory by Q4. I disconnected my laptop and sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. Finally, Helen spoke. Daniel, do you dispute any of this data? Daniel's face was red. I think Caroline is being unnecessarily alarmist. All divisions experience some turbulence during leadership transitions. 43% revenue decline is not turbulence, it's catastrophe, interrupted another board member, a man named Mason Reed. And according to this documentation, you were warned repeatedly about these issues and chose not to act. Connor needed time to find his footing. At what cost? Helen's voice cut like a knife. We're not running a training program for your nephew, Daniel. We're running a business. One that, according to this data, is hemorrhaging money and talent because of nepotistic mismanagement. Connor found his voice. I was trying to innovate. Caroline built a good foundation, but the division needed new ideas. The division needed competent leadership, Helen said flatly. Which it clearly didn't get. Caroline, are you prepared to resume leadership of this division? My heart was pounding, but my voice came out calm. I am. And can you repair the damage that's been done? Not all of it. We've lost clients and team members that will take time to replace. But I can stop the bleeding and begin rebuilding. Helen looked at the other board members. Several nodded. Effective immediately, Caroline Webb is reinstated as director of the